Chapter 5, Sections 3 and 4 of The Golden Bough. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Leon Meyer. The Golden Bough, by Sir James Frazer. Chapter 5, The Magical Control of the Weather. Section 3, The Magical Control of the Sun. As the magician thinks he can make rain, so he fancies he can cause the sun to shine and can hasten or stay its going down. At an eclipse the Ojibways used to imagine that the sun was being extinguished, so they shot fire-tipped arrows in the air, hoping thus to rekindle his expiring light. The Sensis of Peru also shot burning arrows at the sun during an eclipse, but apparently they did this not so much to relight his lamp as to drive away a savage beast with which they supposed him to be struggling. Conversely, during an eclipse of the moon, some tribes of the Orinoco used to bury lighted brands in the ground, because, said they, if the moon were to be extinguished, all fire on earth would be extinguished with her, except such as was hidden from her sight. During an eclipse of the sun, the Kamtchatkans were wont to bring out fire from their huts and pray the great luminary to shine as before. But the prayer addressed to the sun shows that this ceremony was religious rather than magical. Purely magical, on the other hand, was the ceremony observed on similar occasions by the Chilcotin Indians. Men and women tucked up their robes, as they do in travelling, and then, leaning on staves, as if they were heavy laden, they continued to walk in a circle till the eclipse was over. Apparently they thought thus to support the failing steps of the sun as he trod his weary round in the sky. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, the king, as the representative of the sun, walked solemnly round the walls of a temple in order to ensure that the sun should perform his daily journey round the sky without the interruption of an eclipse or other mishap. And after the autumnal equinox, the ancient Egyptians held a festival called the Nativity of the Sun's Walking Stick, because as the luminary declined daily in the sun, and his light and heat diminished, he was supposed to need a staff on which to lean. In New Caledonia, when a wizard desires to make sunshine, he takes some plants and corals to the burial ground, and fashions them into a bundle, adding 2 locks of hair cut from a living child of his family, also 2 teeth or an entire jawbone from the skeleton of an ancestor. He then climbs a mountain, whose top catches the first rays of the morning sun. Here he deposits 3 sorts of plants on a flat stone, places a branch of dry coral beside them, and hangs the bundle of charms over the stone. Next morning he returns to the spot and sets fire to the bundle at the moment when the sun rises from the sea. As the smoke curls up, he rubs the stone with the dry coral, invokes his ancestors, and says, "Sun, I do this that you may be burning hot, and eat up all the clouds in the sky." The New Caledonians also make a draught by means of a disc-shaped stone with a hole in it. At the moment when the sun rises, the wizard holds the stone in his hand and passes a burning brand repeatedly into the hole, while he says, "I kindle the sun, in order that he may eat up the clouds and dry up our land, so that it may produce nothing." The Banks Islanders make sunshine by means of a mock sun. They take a very round stone, called a vatloa or sunstone, wind red braid around it, and stick it with owl's feathers to represent rays, singing the proper spell in a low voice. Then they hang it on some high tree, such as a banyan or a casuarina, in a sacred place. The offering made by the Brahmin in the morning is supposed to produce the sun, and we are told that, assuredly it would not rise, were he not to make that offering. The ancient Mexicans conceived the sun as the source of all vital force, hence they named him Ipalnemohuani, he by whom men live. But if he bestowed life on the world, he also needed to receive life from it. And as the heart is the seat and symbol of life, bleeding hearts of men and animals were presented to the sun to maintain him in vigor and enable him to run his course across the sky. Thus the Mexican sacrifices to the sun were magical rather than religious, being designed not so much to please and propitiate him as physically to renew his energies of light, heat, and motion. The constant demand for human victims to feed the solar fire was met by waging war every year on the neighboring tribes, and bringing back troops of captives to be sacrificed on the altar. Thus the ceaseless wars of the Mexicans, and their cruel system of human sacrifices, the most monstrous on record, sprang in great measure from a mistaken theory of the solar system. No more striking illustration could be given of the disastrous consequences that may flow in practice from a purely speculative error. The ancient Greeks believed that the sun drove in a chariot across the sky. Hence the Rhodians, who worshipped the sun as their chief deity, annually dedicated a chariot and 4 horses to him, and flung them into the sea for his use. Doubtless they thought that after a year's work his old horses and chariot would be worn out. From a like motive, probably, the idolatrous kings of Judah dedicated chariots and horses to the sun, and the Spartans, Persians, and Massagetae sacrificed horses to him. The Spartans performed the sacrifice on the top of Mount Taygetus, the beautiful range behind which they saw the great luminary set every night. It was as natural for the inhabitants of the valley of Sparta to do this as it was for the islanders of Rhodes to throw the chariot and horses into the sea, into which the sun seemed to them to sink at evening. For thus, whether on the mountain or in the sea, the fresh horses stood ready for the weary god where they would be most welcome, at the end of his day's journey. As some people think they can light up the sun, or speed him on his way, so others fancy they can retard or stop him. In a pass of the Peruvian Andes stand 2 ruined towers on opposite hills. Iron hooks are clamped into their walls for the purpose of stretching a net from one tower to the other. The net is intended to catch the sun. Stories of men who have caught the sun in a noose are widely spread. When the sun is going southward in the autumn, and sinking lower and lower in the Arctic sky, the Eskimos of Igloolik play the game of cat's cradle in order to catch him in the meshes of the string and so prevent his disappearance. On the contrary, when the sun is moving northward in the spring, they play the game of cup and ball to hasten his return. When an Australian blackfellow wishes to stay the sun from going down till he gets home, he puts a sod in the fork of a tree, exactly facing the setting sun. On the other hand, to make it go down faster, the Australians throw sand into the air and blow with their mouths towards the sun, perhaps to waft the lingering orb westward, and bury it under the sands into which it appears to sink at night. As some people imagine they can hasten the sun, so others fancy they can jog the tardy moon. The natives of New Guinea reckon months by the moon, and some of them have been known to throw stones and spears at the moon, in order to accelerate its progress, and so to hasten the return of their friends, who were away from home for 12 months working on a tobacco plantation. The Malays think that a bright glow at sunset may throw a weak person into a fever. Hence they attempt to extinguish the glow by spitting out water and throwing ashes at it. The Shuswap Indians believe that they can bring on cold weather by burning the wood of a tree that has been struck by lightning. The belief may be based on the observation that in their country cold follows a thunderstorm. Hence in spring, when these Indians are traveling over the snow on high ground, they burn splinters of such wood in the fire, in order that the crust of the snow may not melt. Section 4. The Magical Control of the Wind. Once more, the savage thinks he can make the wind to blow or to be still. When the day is hot and a Yakut has a long way to go, he takes a stone which he has chanced to find in an animal or fish, winds a horsehair several times round it, and ties it to a stick. He then waves the stick about, uttering a spell. Soon a cool breeze begins to blow. In order to procure a cool wind for 9 days, the stone should first be dipped in the blood of a bird or beast, and then presented to the sun, while the sorcerer makes 3 turns contrary to the course of the luminary. If a Hottentot desires the wind to drop, he takes one of his fattest skins and hangs it on the end of a pole, in the belief that by blowing the skin down, the wind will lose all its force and must itself fall. Fuegian wizards throw shells against the wind to make it drop. The natives of the island of Bibili, off New Guinea, are reported to make wind by blowing with their mouths. In stormy weather the Bogajam people say, "The Bibili folk are at it again, blowing away." Another way of making wind which is practised in New Guinea is to strike a windstone lightly with a stick.